joining us today. My name is Carrie, and I'm back for EMC's fifth podcast with Esti McMillan, founder and CEO of EMC Relocations.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening.
So today's podcast episode actually has a little twist. I'm usually here to mediate the podcast and pose the questions to our guests, but this episode, we're flipping things around, and Esti will be interviewing me. So my family recently and sadly left Jakarta, and of course, preparing to move to a new city had Esti and I reflecting on how it felt to move to Jakarta 3 years ago.
Well, you are truly Miss Carrie in Jakarta. Kamang, Ansa, myself, we really, really miss you. Wish you were in Jakarta.
Oh, well, I miss you back. Um, so Esti and I came up with a blog post on the EMC website. We posted in January, and the second part will be coming up next week, where I've written about my family's experience. And today, Esti and I are going to chat through some of the topics mentioned in the blogs and hopefully inspire some confidence in those listeners who are about to make the move to Jakarta or to give some pointers to people who have recently arrived. But before we jump in, first, we'd like to share some background information with you, especially for any of our new listeners. Many people will likely recognize Esti, a well known member of the expat community in Jakarta and founder of EMC, a boutique relocations company. So, as the expert on all things EMC, Esti, can you please share with our listeners what EMC is all about and why you refer to it as boutique?
Thank you, Carrie. That's right. EMC is a boutique relocation, and we are a small company, and we treat all our clients with the no cookie cutter solution. So each clients are unique in their specification and needs, and we truly listen and deliver only that match their needs. And and our home search is our specialty. And beside home search, we actually offer school search, uh, general settling in program, orientations, and cross cultural training. So we help them from housing to setting up bank account, driver's license, and help to navigate and assist them to how to live in Jakarta as expat as easy as possible.
Hmm. Yeah, there's so many moving parts that go into, EMC's ultimate goal of making every client's move as smooth and easy as possible. And so the podcasts and the blogs are just another extension of that. Every couple of months we release a new podcast, helping to highlight key elements in Jakarta that will help new families learn tips to get settled in faster, and really feel like they found a community that they can connect with. So far, as part of those, we've covered building a community with the local international school, navigating the healthcare system. We did a showcase of the top expat associations in Jakarta, and we also discussed other education options that were available in Jakarta. So today, we're hoping to personalize some of those ideas for you.
Yes, and this podcast episode, we've been chatting about it long time when you were still in Jakarta, and but we never made it into realization because you've been so busy with so many activities, and I've been so busy, and before we knew it, you are across the globe, sitting in Wisconsin, surrounded by the snow, and I'm here in Jakarta, and so that's good that with technology we can reconnect.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you just need to compare our outfits to know who's in the snow and who's in the tropics. But I'm so excited that we still get to record this one. I'm very much in the homesick stages of leaving Jakarta, so relish any opportunity I get to talk about our life there. And Esti and I promise, dear listeners, that we won't keep referring to morning and night in the same session. We'll do our best.
Yes, well, let's not talk about time difference. So it's a bedtime for you, and it's starting of the day for me. So let's get started and introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. So I'm Carrie Crozier, and as I mentioned in the introduction, I've been helping Esti with the EMC podcast and blog posts for the 3 years that my family lived in Jakarta. We're a Canadian family who have been living abroad for over 10 years, first in Australia and then in America. And so moving to Jakarta was our first time living in Asia and what we consider our first real expat experience. So we started as clients of Esti's, and she helped us find our dream Jakarta home, and then we quickly became friends. I lived in Jakarta with my husband and our two young daughters. They were 2 and 4 when we first moved there. And while we were living in Jakarta, I wasn't working, so I was the trailing spouse, and was honestly elated to find such a welcoming expatriate world.
In the blog, you mentioned the success in Jakarta is finding the right place to live, and you and Robbie decided Kamang is the right fit. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, that actually, happened because before we moved to Jakarta, we were starting to talk to you, and honestly, that move was such a lifesaver. So, true story. When we were first, starting to explore the move, we assumed that we'd have to live in the SCBD in a high-rise apartment. We would just have to get used to the smaller space and lack of backyard. And that's perfectly fine, but it just wasn't our vibe. And then, my husband started talking to you, and we learn about this walkable neighborhood area with local cafes and restaurants, a family friendly vibe, close to the kids' school, near the SCBD, and had homes that were in our budget with patios and backyards. So it was one of those moments where we're like, okay, this could actually really work for us.
Yeah, and you mentioned also the importance of healthcare when you live as expat in Jakarta. Can you outline that to our listeners? Do you have personal experience about healthcare in Jakarta?
Yes. And I mean, I say this over and over to anyone who will listen. Make sure you know your local clinics and hospitals and have a plan for what you should do also outside of regular hours. So, we were lucky. We didn't have any true emergencies during our stay, but I do have one memory of this horrible parent moment for me. It was very early on in our move, late at night. I happened to be the only one home, and my youngest daughter woke up crying, saying that she couldn't breathe. So, obviously, your rational brain, the fact that she's crying and speaking, it wasn't a crisis, but you panic when you hear things like that as a parent, wondering, what do I do? Do I try to figure out how to take her to the ER now? That moment of indecision is just a nightmare. So luckily, I had met a friend who is a super planner. I phoned her. She gave me the number of a great pediatric specialist who also used WhatsApp. You could message him late at night, which I did. And after just a brief chat, we were able to assess that coming in the morning for an appointment would be fine. So again, not a true emergency, but if I had had that plan in place before, it would have saved so much headache and stress. So don't be me and get your plan in place.
Yeah, and you moved to Jakarta with two young girls. And
Hmm.
I remember we discussed this how important education for the girls and finding the right school. And we discussed North Anglia School. And can you chat about North Anglia to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I seriously cannot say enough good things about that school. It was the first school that my daughters ever really attended, and watching them flourish there was just so cool. They were able to make friends with kids from all over the world. The teachers were fabulous. The campus was adorable. And they really do a good job of fostering a strong community connection. I was able to meet so many lovely people through the school and at the school. And, as anyone with young kids knows, when you meet cool parents and your kids get along, it's like winning the parent lottery.
Yes, and also you talk a lot about how important connection for expat community when you live in Jakarta, and this is something that we also often mention to our client, the importance of connection. So we offer that to our kind of as part of our relocation services on top of the home search and school search, and it's a one-stop connection about finding and navigating life in Jakarta, so that they feel comfortable about you know enjoying the expatriate experience. Don't you think that's also the same with you?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Obviously, once we found the home, the next step, and this is where you came in. Um, the first time I ever heard of Anza, which became my eventual second home in Jakarta, was through you. You know, you had sent me links to their Facebook page, encouraged me to join a coffee morning. And I can honestly say my life would not have been as fulfilled without Anza or other groups like the BWA. Um, they have so many fun and interesting activities to keep you busy, and you know, if anything's missing, you're encouraged to start it up with their support. You know, I never thought I'd be able to say that I own a handbag that I actually weaved myself, but you know, there you go. Like that's Jakarta for you. And I think that's something you don't think about when you have your checklist of, oh, I have to find my home, I have to do this, I have to do that. It's also really important, like you said, to get that connection and to find your people. You know, that's where true comfort and happiness comes from.
Right. And in the blog, you that is coming next week, you will write about cultural and daily life experience in Jakarta. And what was the biggest difference you found living the expat life and living the normal life?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a million things I could say, but I think the biggest thing at the end of the day is really time. You know, I had so much more free time to be able to try new things, volunteer a lot of my time, you know, fill my calendar with sports like tennis or padel, learn a new card game like bridge, went to coffee mornings, and you know, so much more, and still had time to hike with my family, travel, explore, you know, shop, join a couple of book clubs. You know, don't get me wrong. You know, I still had two young kids at home, and that they came first no matter what. But having extra help around the house, taking care of most of the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, getting those daily tasks taken off my list, you know, it gave me such a huge amount of time that I've never had before.
Mm.
We did have a nanny help out with the kids, and it was amazing for all of us. She was such a wonderful woman, and the kids absolutely adored her. And you know, between my schedule, the kids' busy social lives and extracurricular schedules, she and myself and our family driver, we were just driving all over Kamang constantly. And then we could still come home at the end of the day and have a healthy home cooked meal ready and waiting and a clean house. You know, it was wonderful. And we're in early days here in our new living situation, and I can tell you that just doesn't magically happen here.
Staff is something that obviously Western household don't have, right? And especially live in. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I actually thought it would be really weird, but you do get used to it very quickly. The homes are set up for it. You know, there's completely separate entrances, private. Everyone has their own privacy and their own space, and then on top of that, you know, Indonesians are just the kindest, generally very happy people. And language isn't a barrier. So, you know, we had a maid at the house who lived with us part time, and she couldn't speak any English, but we were able to get by with smiles. We did have a nanny who could help us translate. The kids adored her, and they loved all of our staff. You know, their driver, our security guys. Again, language wasn't a barrier between us or them, and Indonesians are so incredibly kind and patient with kids that you don't feel like you're always on with a bunch of people around. It just we all became a bit of a household, you know, and it was a lovely experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also mentioned home cooked meals. And you and I have also, with many friends, we have meals together exploring the Indonesian food adventure. Do you miss Indonesian food?
Oh my gosh, yes, yes, I really do. As you know, I will try anything, and I loved being able to discover all the different flavors in Indonesia that I could. I really miss beef rendang, soto ayam, and gado-gado. I am
Wow.
going to try to recreate some of those recipes here, but I'm nervous that it won't be the same. I also really love sambal. Our nanny was an amazing cook, and so we incorporated her sambal into everything. Even Canadian Thanksgiving, we served that. We served sambal with that once. Um, and something else that we would try to do is we'd go whenever we were traveling, we would figure out what the region's signature dish was, and then try it while we were there. And so if you are traveling, this is a tip for anybody. If you're traveling outside of Jakarta, it's really helpful to hire a driver because they act as a guide as well, and they can take you to those local hidden gems. So in Yogyakarta, I actually tried krecek, which I
Oh,
didn't know what. Yeah, I didn't know what it was until I tasted it, but it was so delicious. So I was glad that I did. And for listeners who don't speak Bahasa, krecek is a traditional Javanese cow skin stew dish. So some,
wow.
yeah, not something you'll find in the grocery stores here.
Where's your must go? Well, you have visitors in Jakarta. You have many visitors, obviously. And where's the must go places when you have guests?
Yeah, oh yeah. So I had two because we did have quite a few visitors, and so the plan we had during the day while my husband was at work, I would take our guests on a walking tour of Sunda Kalapa. There's a fabulous tour guide, Bram, and I'll talk a lot more through the details in the blog. But you basically got to go through a water taxi, an urban kampung, try out a bajaj, see a bunch of historical sites, Chinatown, the Maritime Museum, and when you're all done and you're tired from all the walking, you have reservations at Cafe Batavia, which is wonderful in Kota. I actually took that tour 4 different times. And, each time I feel like I learned something new, and my guests always loved it as well, especially the ones that were staying with us in Kamang, to be able to then see the difference between Kamang and Sunda Kalapa and Kota Tua and all of the areas of Jakarta. So that was a really cool experience. And then our second go to was to take our guests hiking in Sentul. So depending on who was visiting, we did some either calm or some more rigorous hikes. Usually the checklist was rice paddies, kampung. We wanted to see the goats and chickens, and then usually end at a waterfall. So the views were spectacular, even on a clear day. Even if it wasn't a clear day, which is very common, as you know, in Sentul, you still get to see that beauty of the countryside and the more traditional look at Indonesian life. So yeah, I'll include more details about that in the blog so that people can check that out.
Uh, well, thank you, Carrie. That's such a lovely chat, and thank you for this our first long distance podcast. And well, normally it's you thanking me and all the other guests in the on the during the podcast, but now it's your my turn to say thank you to you for this informative. Is there anything else that would you like to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, this has been so much fun. It's fun getting the microphone flipped around. So thank you, Esti. Obviously, I'd rather be having this conversation with you in person, but this is the next best thing, and it's been really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really looking forward to the next one and reading the blog about your cultural and daily life. And I'm sure our listeners learn a lot about your experience, and hopefully, they learn also the fun and positive living in Jakarta. And we hope that you join us for the next session.
Yes, absolutely. And so, listeners, if you have any questions at all for us, please leave your comments on the Instagram or blog page. And remember to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our podcasts. And I will include links to the EMC website and Instagram pages in the details of this podcast. See you next time, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. See you till next podcast.